What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Hobby Pants, working on an extension for a commission this evening. Got a World Eater army done here not too long ago, and well, we got to add to it. We've got a couple of Chaos Rhinos that need to get that proper treatment. Fully included are, of course, some third-party bits. Might be Forge World, might be third-party. Not 100% sure. I do know there are imperfections in them. So that would lead me to believe it's probably Forge World. Most of the third-party bits are pretty clean by comparison. So let's up our game, Forge World. What's going on, Luke Sheffield? But yeah, tonight is going to be pretty nice and easy. I do want to throw a caveat out there. As a commission artist, I don't tend to allow customers to assemble their own stuff. And we're going to see some stuff on these models tonight that are kind of indicative of why we do that. But this is a dear friend who has done a lot of business with the studio, and frankly, I just care for him as a person. So being able to get these done for him, even if I'm doing something a little different than I normally would, I'm okay with that. You know, they're going to a great guy, so we're going to make it work. For a point of reference, let's show you, these are the World Eaters. This is one we kept behind for color reference. We see the halberd broke off on him, so it was easy to pick which one we kept behind. But really nice scheme. You know, gold trim, white body, blue accents. We're going to be doing the same thing on this tank here this evening. And I'm looking forward to it, frankly. We've got to complete the add-ons, these two Rhinos. We've got 20 Jackals, and then we have got a couple of Chaos Spawn as well. How many are we going to do? I don't know. How many of those are going to be on the video? Not sure. Some of them might get done behind the scenes. You know, maybe we'll show them off on the video. But we've got a lot of stuff here to get done, and I can't share all of it with you guys, unfortunately. Spent the better part of today priming up 2 big boxes full of Marvel Crisis Protocol terrain. I have half a Brotherhood list just about painted up. I got to get the other half done. Of course, going to be subbing in some of my favorite X-Men to go along with it. And that's a project that we're really excited about. We've got Luke Sheffield, like we said. What's up, Luke? How are you? White Chocolate up here as well. What's going on, White Chocolate? Dean P. Man, all-stars in here already tonight. Great to see everybody. Make sure, if you guys do tune in, make sure you do say hello so I know you're here and I can say hello right back to you. If you like the content, make sure you hit that like button. It's going to really help us grow this channel. And of course, if you haven't yet subscribed, consider doing so. We've got additional things we are going to be rolling out as time goes on. We do have some pre-recorded videos, kind of to foreshadow the Gobros Academy getting started later in the summer. We're going to get out some basic videos. Right now I'm working on the first one, which is explaining the color wheel. Right? I know everybody talks about the color wheel, right? But let's discuss what it all means and how to utilize it. But that's not tonight. That will be coming soon. So big thank you, of course, to our sponsors, Transatlantis Games, bringing us these silky, too thin coats paint. Absolutely love the product. Big shout out to Spray Gunner, providing us with that unofficial Hobby Goblins airbrush, that Infinity. Such a great tool. We have got Game Envy, lighting up the desk with the Lucent lights, and of course the wet palette you see on stream. Has a bunch of accessories to go along with that. It's not your grandmother's wet palette. And of course, last but not least, Artis Opus, with some of the best brushes in the game. We appreciate you guys, the sponsors, for really supporting the show like you have since the beginning, you know, and we're going to really do our best to show people, like, well, you know, how these things work best on the table as well. So thank you guys for tuning in. A lot of work to get done tonight, so we're going to just jump right into it. Let's get this guy out of here. First thing we've got to do this evening is get ourselves started with our primer. Now, we've got our black coat on there. We're going to do an interesting zenithal this evening. We're going to kick it off with our German red brown. That's going to cover the bulk of the model, maybe leaving a slight bit of the black in the deepest of recesses, but more of this is going to be in the recesses than the black. We're going to follow that up with this ghost gray. All right, this is a Vallejo primer as well. Guys, there's a bunch of primers out there, and I'm sure most of them are good. this is the primer I like and I use almost exclusively. So just get to show that off. The reason we pull this in, the bottle doesn't really do it much justice, but you can kind of see the paint dried on the outside of the bottle. This is a nice cool gray. That's going to contrast that German red brown very well. Of course, we're going to be using a white ink to get our top highlights on it, right? And then we are going to be marrying it all together with this red streaking grime. It says for Panzer Gray, but it actually is a red color itself. It just looks really good over gray. Coincidence we're going to be using it on this model with those cool gray tones? Probably not. But that's also why the German red brown is in here. German red brown, of course, is going to be setting the stage for that Panzer Gray to really shine. So the goal is tonight to at least get all of these base coats done, you know, and then from there we'll be adding on our golds, our silvers, our blues, and letting it ride. So let's get crack-a-lackin'. Got the airbrush ready to go. Well, let's see, might need a little clean. Let's see how it sprays. It might be mostly ready to go. We might be hanging out for a minute, cleaning out the airbrush to get the flow right. Looks like it's doing what we need it to. Very good. What's going on, William Payne? Thanks for joining us. Always great to see you. Something many of you guys might be aware of, might not be aware of course, we do a paint stream. We just had our third Wake and Make paint stream. Those take place Monday, and that's Cryface getting in here, really pushing the boundaries in terms of like what he can get done with paint. That's our showcase painter for the Happy Goblin Studios. I am just kind of grunt labor. So if you want to see like really high detailed painting and get inside his mind, well, make sure you tune in for that. That's Mondays, 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So far, he has been working on some MCP himself, but I know that we've got a couple of other things in the mix. Now, if we get far enough along with these guys tonight, something I'm super excited about is the next project is going to be our test scheme for our Emperor's Children. We've got that army ready to go. We just need to get some paint on it for the Cave Reps stream. So if you guys are tuning in for the first time to this channel and know nothing about the Cave Reps stream that I'm speaking of, that of course is our Battle Report stream. That's the channel we started originally. Good bit more sizable, you know, and of course it's had a lot more polish on it as well. Those games take place, of course, Saturdays and Sundays at 5:30 Eastern Standard Time for members, 6 o'clock for everyone else. And then Wednesday night with a 6:30 for members and 7 for everybody else. 3 games a week, 3 painting streams a week. We will sleep when we are dead. So let's get crack-a-lackin'. First thing we need to do is get this zenithal started with this German red brown. Let's go ahead and prepare some in a cup. Give her a nice shake. Now, some of these primers are good to spray right out of the bottle. Other of them do need thinning. Now, I thin all of them, just a little bit at the very least. The white does get thinned a little bit more than everything else because I'm willing to go in layers. But, you know, try it, see what you like. You might find that you can just jump right into it with some of them. But it's always good to have an idea of what consistency your paint is in the cup before it ever goes in the airbrush. So, got good flow on it. You see how it's like moving right down the side there, but still leaving plenty of pigmentation behind. That is what we're looking for. Right? What we don't want to see is we don't want to place it on the side and have it stick there. We want that paint to run down the cup and back into the pool, and we want to make sure that when it does so, we can look through that paint and determine the opacity. Sometimes if we're applying a filter, we want that opacity to be very low, where we can see through the paint, and it's basically just leaving a hue. Other times, such as the primer, well, we want opaque. We just want good flow on it. So that is a pretty good start. Now let's just double check and make sure this brush is going to behave like we want it to. If not the brush's fault. No, it would be our poor maintenance, but you think we're going to change the way that we maintain our stuff? No way, not today. No sirree. We're going to start on the sides. Our brightest colors are going to be towards the bottoms of the models. Our darker colors are going to be towards the top of the models. So when we're doing our zenithal, we're going to go ahead and acknowledge that, and we're going to make sure that this top layer has a nice coverage of this German red brown. Hope everybody's had a great week so far. I know it is quite early in the week, plenty more a week to go, but hopefully it's off to a good start for you. Make sure you guys sound off. Let me know how everybody is doing. Something else to add, depending on how efficiently we get this done tonight, we are going to go ahead and get into the Hobby Goblins Discord and over to the Hobby Pants feedback requests section and go ahead and address some of those requests for feedback. We're going to go ahead and do that live. We're going to share those photos on Discord, and we're going to, kind of talk about what we like, what we don't like, what improvements can be made, but most specifically, we're going to be addressing any questions that the submitter has asked us to talk about. So I know there was a couple of them in there. If you have something that you might like a little feedback on, make sure you drop that in there by about 9:30. All right, and that will give time to get it discussed. That's something that we want to add back to the show, something we used to do on the Cave Reps channel back when we initially were doing, Hobby Pants as a part of that channel. And, well, it's just kind of time to bring it back. I am experiencing a little bit of an issue with the flow out of the front of the airbrush. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and lubricate that tip. Start with some water first. If that doesn't work, we can go ahead and drop some cleaner in that. That'll just kind of help us loosen up any bad actors that might be sticking to the needle and causing that lack of flow. I think we can also crank this compressor up just a little bit, take it closer to 25, 27. Perfect. It's important to make sure you address those clogs and don't just try and muscle through it, because sometimes what you might have happen is, you build up pressure inside the airbrush and then it releases, much like we just saw right there. It releases in a huge amount of spray. Something like this primer stage, not a big deal. But, of course, when you're starting to work with filters, what you don't want is a filter to have a blowout and blast a bunch of opaque paint across it because of it. Okay. Nice and easy. We don't need to do a whole lot on the metallic bits. Those are going to get just about a full coat of metallic, of that silver or gold, depending on what it is we're messing with. Now, a lot of the stuff we're using tonight, the decisions we're making in terms of application, procedural steps, so on and so forth, the main focus and objective that we want to accomplish with that is speed and efficiency. So there's going to be a lot of things that we could do with a finer brush work to really try and push the level of detail even higher. However, there's a lot that we can do with efficient procedures that won't really hurt our end result. And that's what we're going to be going for this evening. And, if you've got any tips or tricks or things that you like to do that kind of lend towards that same goal, feel free to hit them off in chat. Otherwise, hopefully we've got a couple of nuggets that might help you get knocked out whatever big project you might have looming in front of you at the moment. Good to see everybody back from Adepticon. Big congratulations to Dean P and his boys for, knocking down some paint awards for that team's event. I did get to see that battle board. That battle board was pretty awesome, my friend. Dean, you got to bring it with you when you come to town, man. Let's try and get you in town. Ideally, if we could get you in early on a Thursday afternoon and have you join me for a Thursday night stream, we could do a hands-on airbrush tutorial right here on stream, right? That way, two things, right? When you get back home, if you still had a little bit of concern, you'd have a reference to go back to say, all right, well, how did we address this? How did we do that? Right? But also, you know, maybe that same type of tips and tricks that I'm sharing with you, we can kind of share with everybody else at the same time. So let me know how that works for your schedule and when we can make that happen. But I'm definitely very anxious to see you really start to embrace that tool. You're already doing so much on your models that are, you know, so great. But, you know, adding extra tools and techniques to our, you know, toolbox, if you will, is never a bad idea. Also, don't be scared, right? What are you going to do, mess it up? Even if you do, it's not permanent. You can do something about it at any time. What's going on, Dan? How are you, my friend? Dan getting those Emperor's Children assembled. How are you finding that box so far, Dan? Nice. Chocolate, did you get Appreciation Guybrush 24 Evolution CR Plus 2-in-1 order place delivery set for Monday? You're going to love it, dude. It's a great brush for sure. And that old Trigger Iwata is still going to be fantastic for the big clumsy paints. Things like we're doing here with Zenithal, getting your basic priming done, getting your varnishes applied, and then you can really utilize the other one for the stuff that takes a little bit more deft maneuvering. Let's just go ahead and run some airbrush cleaner through here, and we can move on to this Ghost Gray. Little things like this, Dean, even if you're just starting here, much like William Payne is saying, even if you're just starting with Prime, I think that you'll see just in how quickly we can get these guys ready for the other steps of the process using an airbrush. It really will take army painting to another level. And being that I know that not only do you have a bunch of World Eaters you're working on, but you're still going to need to do 4 or 5 display boards for those World Eaters before you're happy. You know, the more time you can save yourself through that process, the better you'll be. So again, nice, cool gray. Don't need a whole lot. Now, because this has got more white pigment in it, we're going to thin it a little bit more than we did that red. And we're going to just make sure we visit a couple of coats on it where necessary. Oh man, I got myself a nice clean water and then one that was kind of a dirty water. And of course, what you know, I rinsed out my red primer in my clean water, which once we get started painting the white, I'm not going to want it to be, I'm going to want that white unmolested. So we are going to have to change that water, but that's not a big deal. All by myself in the studio this evening. Definitely much nicer to have a producer here, but that's just because I like to hang out with my friends. But we're going to get it done. The good news is I've got all of you guys to hang out with, even if I am talking to myself mostly. Where is everybody watching from? I recognize most of you. So I've got an idea on most of you. Okay, getting a little bit of speckling. Let's go ahead and thin that down just a little bit further. I should have checked while it was in the cup. Yeah, white is a problem pigment for many reasons, especially on an airbrush. There's just no avoiding it. It's chunkier, it's going to stick to the needle, so we are going to have to maintain it more consistently than some of our finer pigment paint lines. A little bit of speckling here, but that's not bad. So again, we want lighter at the bottom. So we're just now going to be doing a zenithal starting at the bottom to push it up almost to that full opacity gray. All right, let's go ahead and adjust the pressure, see if we can get it to spray a little bit cleaner for us. Speckly for this stage really is just fine. It's not that big of a deal. And we're going to go cover most of the red, but just very thinly up at the top. All right, so you can see that red is still prevalent there. If Cody happens to tune in, Cody, I did wind up stealing the front plate for that Rhino from an existing model that I had here in the shop. I figure it's only ever going to be seen on stream at a great distance, so if it's missing a key element, that's okay. It's going to be better than you having this out at an event and right in people's faces and having it missing some stuff. So we got you taken care of. So let's focus this light color primarily towards the center of the tops, leaving a little darkness right there on the sides, and then just kind of following the trend. Where these slopes are, where they bend, we're going to have right there at the bottom of them is where we're going to build up that white the strongest. And I say white, but you know, it ain't white. It is a cool gray. Hey, cool gray, bro. Now the reason I'm doing the white at the bottom and the dark at the top, right, is kind of two-part, right? This is going to be primarily lit up. It's going to be primarily our core values in terms of color shade, right? So we want to make sure there's a darkness at the top edge where those two corners meet, so that way there's a gradient and movement with it. Also, depending on where the light is coming from, there's less obstructions to block that light, assuming the light is coming from, say, this direction here rather than a direct overhead. But even in a direct overhead, this top corner is likely going to be receiving some interference from the top corner there that's going to shadow that down a bit more naturally. So we're not doing a realistic paint job by any stretch of the imagination tonight. It is a bit more of that grimdark faux realism that we talked about. So as long as we get it close enough to, you know, kind of convince people that they're seeing what we want them to see, then we're good to go. Even if it's not an excellent light study. And of course, a lot of this is going to get that white over it, but the big thing is we just want to make sure that when that white hits the model, that it's not going to have to defeat this red, right? You know, if you have a darker color and spray white over top of it, you have to build that white up to get that opacity there. And because of the chunkiness of white pigments, that's how you're going to end up with those textured models that weren't textured by intent, right? So we're going to do everything we can to allow that pigment, the actual white, once it hits, to be able to apply the colors that it needs to without having to do much work to defeat what's underneath it. And that will help us get a much smoother finish off the white. Dean going to break out the kits I picked up for some Demon kit bashes. Very, very cool. I definitely love your kit bash work. Looking forward to seeing it. Now these exhausts right here, right, we're going to go ahead and get the white up on those because they are further away from the back of the canvas. By that I mean when we're looking at this Rhino, the deepest parts, like those divots inside of here, or running the creases running alongside of those. These are standing up taller than them, so we want them to have a little bit more light. That's also going to help us through our next stages to really make sure that we have the dimensionality, the volumetrics of the shapes that we're playing with are going to be well defined. And you see I'm being pretty quick, pretty loose with the stuff I'm doing here. Not a whole lot of, high skill airbrush stuff going on here at all. But we are getting some nice depth and shadow that's kind of easily baked in for us to get kicked off. And again, that red underneath it is just going to be a really great carrier for that streaking grime for Panzer Gray. So just coming back across it, making sure I've got my opacity where I want it. And then we're going to start dropping our white. I think we're going to spend most of our time, painting the trim, right, as one does on a Chaos model. Most of the time goes into painting the trim and getting the metallics right. I do have a couple of tricks for them that it's kind of low impact metallics. You get a good metallic coat on there, you throw a filter across it, bada bing, bada boom, they look great. An example of that, of course, let's go ahead and dial in on this homie right here. So our golds are going to use a Guilliman flesh. And that Guilliman flesh, that red hue, is going to go really nice over the gold and really warm that gold up even further than its natural state. And then all of our metallics, not a whole lot of silvers on this guy to show off, but those are going to get a coverage of, where's my daddy? Nope, that's not him. Not on the table in front of me, but it's going to be a gray contrast that I'll show you when I have it in hand. And it's just going to cool down our silvers. So that way we keep up with our variance in temperatures, to keep that temperature contrast high. Luckily, there's not a bunch of fleshy bits on here like there were on the models. A lot of time went into painting the fleshy bits, especially of the 8-pound. So, got to run to drive, try to get back on. Hey, if you can, that'd be great. Be great to see it. If not, just be safe. All right, and we are about to start messing with white. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and rinse this brush out, get it ready for the white ink here in a moment. And then I do need to swap this water out, just so that way we're not adding red to that pure white that we're trying to get across here. Watching from the cat cave. Nice. All right, guys, I'm going to let you be here for a moment, just kind of staring into the abyss of these rhinos. Let me go swap this water. I'll be back in a moment. All right. So for our white tonight, we're going to be using an ink rather than an acrylic paint. All right. And then we're going to be having to lock this down. For those of you guys who don't know, the difference between an acrylic ink and an acrylic paint is the binder that you're going to find in a paint. That binder, of course, is going to solidify the paint and prevent it from rubbing off when it gets moist again. Most of your white inks do not have that, right? So if you spray something white and you hit it with let's say a wash or a contrast of some sort, it can very easily cause that white to chip and break and start spreading around, maybe even reactivate under the worst circumstances. So if you're going to use ink, just lock it in with a varnish once you've got it applied the way that you want it. Won't need a whole bunch. And because these are, Space Marine armor, if you chip Space Marine armor, put metallics underneath it, a lot of your lore junkies are going to, hit you with that, well, actually, that armor doesn't rust, or like, the metallics underneath it might not be like silver because it's a different polycomposite or whatever. Well, a Rhino, it's safe to say a Rhino can have a little bit more texture than something like an armor. So we're going to see how this spray goes, but what we might wind up doing is coming back with a sponge and just doing some white application with a sponge to add some textural elements to it. The models themselves don't have a ton of weathering on them. He is doing the blood himself, so we're not going to be doing the blood spray on these or anything like that. I had printed out some decals with the idea that we might go ahead and put some decals on here, well, actually transfers for airbrush stencils. However, all the places that I would have put them have these aftermarket parts on them. So don't even need to worry about any of that. We just need to worry about making sure those get painted up nice and crispy. So we're going to go ahead and thin out this acrylic or this ink as well. And we're going to get this to line up, get the right consistency on here, and then we're going to drop that into the middle of the grays where we want that highest saturation of white. For this, I'm also going to go ahead and put a little airbrush thinner in the cup of the airbrush. We're going to spray that through, make sure the needle gets coated real nice. Lubing up that needle will also help the pigment fly across the needle rather than be inclined to stick to the needle. We're still going to have to maintain like we normally would. It's not going to be the fix for us that keeps that from being a thing. You're always going to have to maintain, but hopefully it'll make us have to do our maintenance just a little bit less. So let's go right up the middle here, especially right on these doors. Full opacity at the bottom here. And just to keep this from going on too thick, we're going to be patient with it. We're going to do a pass, and we're going to come back and we're going to do another pass. So again, the bottoms of those right there to really pump them up a good bit. The fronts of these components. I think you guys can start to see just how kind of rich that gradient is already getting. All right, second pass on the bottom. And we're just going to soften up that red just a little bit with this white because I've got it spraying fairly translucent. Yeah, I'll tell you, you know, the tricks that I have for vehicles means that if I ever played Imperial Guard, it would just be tanks. You know, painting up 100 plus, like, you know, infantry bodies with your scions and your catechins and all of that. That is a lot of work. But if you're able to leverage an airbrush, you know, vehicles can actually go pretty quick. Ideal goal, I get these both basically done tonight with maybe a few touch-ups to do after the fact. But I don't want to get my hopes up too early too. I got to see what kind of problems we run into and what kind of things we might have to employ to, you know, resolve those issues. I don't know if you can see there, see that texture right across here? Looks like when the glue is being applied, a strand of glue kind of probably came off of the applicator, whether it was a brush or that little GW tube, and really kind of mucked that up a good bit. A little bit more time, I could have cleaned it up a bit, and I absolutely would have had that been really the only issue. But there's a fair number of issues around through the assembly process. Now, one thing I've done here that's causing a little bit of speckling, you should always start your airflow off of your subject. All right, so I start the airflow right here next to it. A lot of times what causes those speckles is after, especially with a loose paint like an ink, after you've sprayed, a little bit of that ink remains on the needle, and as soon as you open up the air, that ink on the needle has to go somewhere. So knowing that, always open up on a palette, or just, you know, if you're crude like I am and just like to work directly off of the tabletop, spray the tabletop, air, get that needle cleared off, you know, and then you can avoid a lot of the big obvious stuff. And you see, I'm spraying a lot of stuff that is likely going to get a metallic coverage on it after we're done. But, you know, having a little paint on it now won't hurt it, especially if metallics we're going to be putting on there opaque, so they can overwrite basically anything left behind. If I was trying to leverage a contrast paint to do something, then I might, you know, be a little bit more cautious on where the white hits. But that is not the world we live in today. I heard lube was involved. I knew that would summon Hobgob. Rob, how are you, my friend? Rob, I think Thursday we're going to do up the test scheme for those Emperor's Children right here on stream. I told Julian about it yesterday here in the shop. He's pretty excited for it. I think that it's going to be a nice way to get the army looking quite good while really making the best use of our time. That way we can get it done in a hurry. Oh, see that blowout right there? That's the type of thing we want to avoid. You know, luckily, it was on a spot that doesn't matter. So just coming back with a third or fourth pass, depending on where we're at, just to like really push those whites up where they're most important. All right, pretty happy with that. Let me just, there's little nubs right here above these doors. We're just going to go ahead and drop a little bit of white on there as well. That should be getting direct light, so it shouldn't be in the shadow like the underneath of it would be. All right, well there we have our white paint scheme applied. We can go ahead and get the varnish on once that ink dries. Ink does take just a few moments longer than your traditional acrylic paint. So we're going to let that set for just a moment and get where it needs to be. In the meantime, we'll go ahead and clean out the brush. Next step for the brush will be that varnish. So we can go ahead and get it ready for such a thing. Drop a little airbrush cleaner in there, run it across the needle, let it sit while we wait for that stuff to dry. Yeah, only slightly surprised that Malpass hasn't popped in here just because he consumes everything World Eaters and Demons. So I imagine he's probably going to check out some of it later. This commission project, guys, it was tough. It was really tough. It was basically, with the exception of the Demon engines, everything that came out in the 9th edition codex with max unit sizes, right? So just tons of 8-pound, 27 8-pound in total, which you can't even run 27 anymore, I don't think, right? 27 8-pound. It was 50 or 60 berserkers, and then, you know, the 20 jackals. I think there's only 10 terminators, which the terminators turned out to be my favorite of all the models. It was really rewarding to have it done. The models looked great. Cody was super happy with them. I was super happy with them. However, much bloodshed and tears on the paint process. It was a long, arduous process to get all of those models done. And I think that the calendar date of booking the commission compared to the calendar date of the delivery of the commission is kind of indicative of just how much work it actually took. Did a couple of things on there, used some chipping medium for the shoulder pads. I painted all of my blues first. I painted, not chipping medium, I'm sorry, masking fluid. Painted masking fluid across all of my blues, then painted everything else, and had a bit of a debacle getting all that masking fluid off. Didn't think about all of the texture with the chains and like little sharp teeth bits and all of that. Well, it probably took 2 solid days just to remove the masking fluid. Knowing that if I had to do it all over again, I would change my order of operations and would not take the time to paint all that masking fluid on there. But we live, we learn. If you guys are so inclined, feel free to share this video across your social media. Let everybody know what we're sitting here doing, working on tonight. See if we can't help get a few more eyes exposed to us here. Add a few more people to the subscriber base would be absolutely appreciated. All right, so let's just go ahead and drop this varnish on here. Let's lock all of this in. Now, a part of me says let's just go ahead and hit it with a gloss varnish, because in order to do the streaking grime, we want to put that across the gloss varnish. I do have quite a bit of stuff to paint with a brush. A lot of those metallics. We want to get those done before we move into that streaking grime. And so I'm going to actually use just a matte to lock it down. That matte's going to give me extra tooth on the model as well, so the metallics will stick much easier and not risk beading up like would happen over a gloss coat. Once we've got those things done, then we'll go ahead and apply our gloss prior to our streaking grime. But there's no wrong way to do it, right? You could go gloss right off of the rip, and it might just take an extra layer or two to get your metallics where you'd want them to be. Either way is accessible. This is just the way I like. And we don't have to go crazy with the varnish. We just simply need enough varnish on there to cover the ink, right? Just to lock that ink down and serve as a binder for us. So we're going to go ahead and rinse the brush out, make sure it's nice and clean. We've got a little bit of varnish in the cup. We've got a little airbrush thinner in the cup. We're just going to go ahead and stir it in the cup, get it nice and mixed up. And then back into the water. How many of you guys have struggled painting white in the past? Another thing to know about messing with inks. Inks have a higher surface tension, so they are going to be more of a satin to a gloss finish depending. It can be a bit more of a pain trying to determine is it dry or not when you've got something with that sort of finish, but a matte coat will serve us well. And while that dries, I'm going to go grab that Griffhound Charger Gray. That's going to be very, very useful in what we need it to do. You know what? I did forget a step, but my order operations is still fine. Before we get into those metallics, we are going to go ahead and apply a bit more of that gray to add more dynamics. And we'll do that here in just a moment. Here's that Griff Charger Gray. Now in a pinch, we could have used something like this Space Wolves Gray, considerably lighter. It would still do a really nice job cooling down a silver. I like this one a little bit better for what we're trying to accomplish here. So now we've got that in hand for when we start our metallics. For right now though, let's just double check. Looks like we are dried down. Let's go ahead and grab Apothecary White here. We're going to use this in a non-traditional sense here. You see there's a lot of sediment right here on the bottom of it. We're going to go ahead and do something about that. I have these little flying saucer agitators. Shout out to Spray Gunner. The extra ridges on these work very well, you know, a little better than just a regular ball bearing. So let's give her a good shake. Let's shake the devil out of it. It is starting to break that sediment up slower than I want, so we're gonna kind of force it to do what we want it to do. Let's grab ourselves one of these disposable junk brushes we've got. And we're just gonna get down in the bottom and physically agitate the bottom of that jar to get all that stuff moving. And we're not going to get all of it to let loose. Guys, some of it's still going to stay there, and that's fine. We just want enough pigmentation in the fluid to actually have some sort of effect for us. And then we're going to spray this on the opposite ends, right? We hit the bottoms with the white to get that white nice and bright. So we're going to be spraying the tops. Some of this will even be overriding some of that red. I mean, not fully, not full opacity. Right? But it will help shift that red. And you'll find that Apothecary White is very, very close to that gray color that we used as a primer. However, the transparency on it is going to do better than that primer would have done. So again, non-traditional way to use a contrast paint, and in many ways I think the best way to use a contrast paint. Use it as a filter. It's nice to be able to have contrast for that like quickly done project, right? You know, do your slap chop method, or, you know, even just paint it white and then just quickly just block in all of your colors like a coloring book. Hey, that's a great efficient way to get something done that's tabletop, right? And we're going to just set the governor on the back of the airbrush here that'll keep us from pulling the brush back too far. We're going to go ahead and just hit all the spots that should have shadow. Not a whole lot. Doesn't need much. It might not even look like much is happening on your end of the screen there. Again, doesn't take much. Doesn't take much, but it does a lot for you in the long run. And if you go too deep, you could always load up a bit more white and then come back and do the white again. That's totally acceptable. Just a little bit at a time. Probably 2-to-1 contrast to thinner, if I had to eyeball it. All right, so you see here, runs right down the cup, and there's a fair amount of opacity to it. Starting with a purple shadow, hold on, let me go back. Literally painting it now, starting with purple shadow sponged in first, then gray layers, then off-white, up to white with a thin speed paint blend. Well, not literally right now because I'm building a giant rat thing that's become a giant rat hell demon thing. Nice. I don't know, is that reading? Can you see what's going on? All right, there's something we got to talk about, guys. There is a series of YouTube videos. The first one I saw was this kid standing outside of an Arby's talking about, he'd kind of spliced it together with a news report of a lady that drove through the front window of an Arby's. And dude is hilarious, right? Calls himself Onyx the Fortuitous, right? And one of the big things that's a part of his shtick is he'll make a ridiculous statement and then be like, I don't know, right? Anybody in chat know who it is I'm talking about? Anybody in chat seen those videos? I hope so, because he got together with some of his friends and they made a movie about Onyx the Fortuitous, and I was up way too late last night watching this movie free on Prime, and it was so stupid, and I loved it for it, right? Intentionally stupid in the best of ways. But Onyx the Fortuitous would be well worth a YouTube search, if nothing else, to watch those short form videos he did, because the kid's hilarious. He is absolutely hilarious. I'm just going to use what's left in the cup to reinforce some of it in here. Really make sure that we've got a nice, subtle, yet full gradient. So one piece of advice I can give you, Dean, about painting white, figure out a process with as few steps as possible. The more steps you have, the greater your chance of buildup and texture on the surface, especially if you're ending with white, if white is the last touch that you put upon it, right? So put together a paint scheme that has you with as few steps as possible, and you'll find you'll get smoother finishes off of that white by the time you're done. That's where I like to do a lot of through the priming and initial base coats, get my white where I want it to be. That way, once it's done, I can just leave it alone. But I think you can start to see like a nice little gradient that's building up with the bottom parts of those exhaust manifolds, you know, revealing the shadow, right? Crisp white to a shadow right beneath it. William Payne finished a Gladiator Reaper earlier today, getting ready to prime 6 Space Marine vehicles and about 60 infantry tomorrow. No big deal. Yeah. Anytime you say something ridiculous like that, you gotta finish it up with no big deal. No, I think that's the way to go. You know, I'm a batch painter. Because of all of the army painting I've had to do, you kind of have to do batch work, right? And so I'm a big proponent for it, and especially with something like vehicles. You know, vehicles, you're going to have a couple of steps that need to get done, but if you're able to, you know, batch them out, you know, you can save a lot of time. Okay, I do want to do a little bit of sponging for a little bit of texture, so we're going to go ahead and grab our dry palette here. I'm going to go ahead and put some white trooper. Hold on, the white star. All right, we want, those are the 2 whites, of course, by 2 thin coats. Look very, very similar on the surface, but you'll find that white star is a little bit cooler, trooper white just a little bit warmer. So we want to stick with the cool. We're going to put some of this on the palette, and we're going to get ourselves a chunky sponge, probably something battle foam-like. And that'll just help us pop some texture in here in a couple of places. Something else I like to do, put that paint in a line when I'm doing sponging so I can kind of move across the line like this as I go. If you put it down in a big circle, a big blob, and then you dip into it, you're going to wind up absorbing a ton of that paint, and it's going to be a little bit harder to control where all it's going. So we're going to do it that way, and we're going to be happy about it. So just dab a little bit in here. Matter of fact, let's grab our fancy tool for this. Alligator clips on one of those disposable brushes, instant sponge brush. And then we're going to take around the top of it where we've got a lot of that gray, and we're going to focus a lot of our sponging there. Kind of like a rudimentary or crude edge highlight, since we're not going to be edge highlighting this, to give a little bit more dimension to that color up top is going to really sell that as a white surface and a shadow kind of embarking upon it. So just around a lot of those edges. Too easy, right? Super, super easy process. This one's got a little bit more drying to do on that side. A little more drying to do here as well. So I'm just going to hit the places that are dry at the moment, but we will have to give that a minute to get everything done. And we definitely don't need to get it to cover like the entire edge, right? Like you would try and do with an edge highlight. You just want little pieces of it that are there to break it up, give a little bit more interest to it. And I might do a little bit more on the front of the vehicle, you know, as the front of the vehicle is going to be the thing that's going to have a bunch of stuff bouncing off of it. And even if it's not chipping the paint, if you've got dirt and, you know, different debris that's attaching to it, well, even that stuff is going to kind of get chipped off as it is getting coming under friction or in contact with any kind of little projectiles. Oh, goodness. Well, there's the big blob because apparently had a little bit of a clog, so that's okay. We just want to keep from getting too much on the sponge too. That way we can control where it's going and not just have a big old splooge of white in a place that we might not want it. Because it do be splooging. You could also take a dry brush with white on it, and you could use that across the corners using a dry brush as a way to kind of edge highlight too. That could provide a pretty cool texture to the piece that you're working on as well. You don't have to do sponge. This is just the way I opted to. And this already looks pretty cool, right? It already looks pretty cool. Like for just some basic table-ready stuff, I could take a brush, quickly just work some, you know, a couple other colors into it, boom, tabletop ready. You know, hour and 15 minutes to get a rhino painted. You know, if you're ever in a situation where you've got an event coming up and you're painting in a hurry, it's nice to know when you've got little hacks like that that you can employ. And again, to add extra layers of detail, I could also take that same that same white paint and a very small brush and run a couple of scratches in varying directions just to give even more interest. Splooging is for next week with them. EC, yes sir. You got it. I have to see if I can work it into the thumbnail. The good news is I'm still such a small channel over here on this side that, well, I don't need to worry about demonetization because we ain't monetized. We're still quite a ways off of that. So if ever there was a time for a splooge fest. And you'll notice that half of my white is actually gray. But when you look at it, you're going to translate it as white. Right? If I paint the whole thing white, well, then it just looks flat and it looks, you know, painted, right? So being able to get that color variation in there with the gray to the white, it's not going to make it look like a gray thing. It's going to make it look like a white thing that's been shadowed. And Imperium vehicles have really, really good contours that really allow us to do a whole lot with the volumetrics. And for those of you wondering, by volumetrics, I mean enhancing the shape of the thing, right? That's 100% what we're trying to accomplish when we talk about things for volumetrics. We want to make sure that the shape of the thing is well defined, even from a considerable viewing distance. One of the reasons I'm adding this texture as well, is not just because it looks cool, but like we talked about, a couple of the flaws and imperfections on the assembly are already going to create a texture. So by doing something along these lines also helps us hide those mistakes a little bit as well. It'll make some of that texturing look just a little bit more either A, intentional, or B, it'll diffuse it to where you can't really notice it. Now, when we look in here, you can still see bits of that red right down there in those creases and those recesses. That's where that streaking grime is going to be settling. So again, that's just kind of setting the table. So when that streaking grime hits it, that, that red holds strong, right? And then we don't have to do a whole bunch for that red to stick down and stand out. Yeah, pretty straightforward. Pretty easy stuff. I want to get a little bit more right here on the front of this guy. So nobody has heard of Onyx the Fortuitous, huh? I watch weird shit, guys. I'm not mad at it. Because, really, I watch everything. Everything. Too much screen time, but most of everything I do, with the exception of this live stuff, of course, most everything I do takes place in front of a screen as is. And if I'm going to be sitting in front of Photoshop or Premiere Pro or any of my editing stuff for 8 to 10 hours at a time, man, I still have to entertain myself. What's going on, 21st Legion Wargaming? Great to see you, my friend. My plan is to hit UPS tomorrow to get this thing shipped to you. So you should look out tomorrow afternoon for some tracking information as this frost giant makes his way to you. Thank you for popping in and saying hello for sure. What's going on, Julian? Easy money. Yeah, Julian, how easy is the money on the assembly of those Emperor's Children? Well, that's the question. Some of them are a little bit fickle. All right, white tanks. Hour and 15 minutes, had to get up and change water, had to get up and go paint, had to sit here and run my mouth a fair amount. So fair assessment, probably 45 minutes, maybe an hour to get to this point with full focus. Right, not bad. Now, one of the questions I had was, where, if at all, am I going to put some blue in here? And I don't necessarily know that I am just yet. I mentioned I brought stencils with me. Let me show you these stencils I brought. Maybe we can try and imagine it in a couple of spots on the vehicle and see if it'd be worth the effort to do it. Now keep in mind, the blue is the stencil, the white is what would be left behind. Because of all the extra details, that is really the only place I could drop something. And frankly, I don't think I want to. Right? I think maybe had I done it a little bit smaller where it fit nicely on those doors, it might have been a decent place to add something like that. The other thought that I had was take and maybe do a diagonal cut and have them placed in weird places on here. Again, had we not had the doors on here, I've got bigger ones as well. My thought was to take something like this and run it across the front quarter of it, right? But we've got such great detail broken there already. So I think we're going to let it slide. If nothing else, we might put some decals into that spot rather than do stencil work. But maybe I've got these for next time for a future project. I don't know, maybe a display board or something, Cody. All right, so we are where we like them. We can start blocking in our colors now. I think we're going to go ahead and start with silver and get that party rolling with silver. For that, we are going to be using... that is almost dead here. Do we have enough metallic color to use metallic color this evening? Maybe we do. Maybe. Especially if we just mix a little bit. I've got an aluminum, and then I've got a silver. The silver is a little low at the moment, so we're just going to add a little bit of this aluminum to it. Make sure there's enough in there to get our project done. We want a lighter colored silver. That way, if we were to do a steel or a gunmetal, then once we've applied our filter with that blue that we discussed, that filter would never show up. Four or five boards. Hey, I said 5 boards, man. That's Price is Right rules right there. I think I won. We're going to use a dry palette for this. This metal color is quite thin, so we don't want to put it on a wet palette and have it get even thinner. And we're just going to quickly block in everything that's going to need to go silver. Nice big brush. Probably isn't going to read like much on the screen for you guys because, you know, a silver reflecting light just looks white like the rest of this thing. I did shake the devil out of it, so I do have tiny little air bubbles. Now, many of those are going to settle as we go, but what I'm going to do is just kind of watch it. And if it looks like we're drawing and air bubbles are present, then we're just going to come back over it to smooth those out. One of the downsides to a thinner paint, but one of the plus sides is this coverage. The coverage on these Vallejo metal colors are incredible. And again, for our temperature study, you know, getting the cool blue on here and then getting that kind of that burnt red from the streaking grime that we're going to use into the recesses, having a piece that's got that duality, that's got the warmth to it, it's got the cool to it, all existing in the same place, yet contrasting each other, does a whole lot for us. A whole lot for that end presentation. If I'm assembling it, I'm probably drilling out these exhaust pipes as well. Matter of fact, all the infantry bodies, when they showed up without gun barrels drilled. I did drill all the gun barrels on those guys, just because I was pushing those to kind of a higher level. When you're looking at an army, you can kind of tell what the prominent pieces are, right? And those prominent pieces, we put a little extra love on. So the 8-pound of both flavors had the most done to them in that commission. Whereas the jackals are going to be, pretty clean, but slap chop sort of thing. Don't need anything too fancy on it. Rhinos are, somewhere between the jackals and the berserkers, I would say. Kind of low impact on the army scheme. And these treads are one of those places that's very, very nice to have a loose paint like this. A lot of this underneath too has got that red-brown to it. So even if we don't get full coverage, it's going to be okay. It's going to just give some depth to the treads. Most of the things that are facing up, we are going to make sure we get full coverage on, however. Now, another thing you could probably do would be to spray this stuff silver as one of the first steps, and then just slap some masking tape across it. Super easy to mask it, and then do all of your other spraying. You see, this isn't taking very long. And so the time it takes to do that and then mask it all, I don't know how much time you'd actually be saving. And we're not worried at all if the undersides here get hit with silver. That's okay. Who cares about that? Nobody. That's who. Do our best to keep it off of the white and gray up top where we can. But even if some gets there, not a death sentence. Okay, chains on the butt. Get that blocked in pretty quickly. Yeah, I feel like a lot of that on screen, you can't even really tell what has been painted silver. There's a couple spots I think it's pretty clear. there's a lot of stuff I want to do gold over here. So right now it's just kind of picking what's what. Like I think I want to do those rocket launchers gold. There's a good bit of gold that's going to hit here. We can take a look for reference. For our world stuff is blues over that, gold on the teeth, or silver on the teeth, gold on the trim. So we can use that data that we already have to know how to go ahead and deal with this. And I can go ahead and paint these teeth and that globe. I can go ahead and get that painted silver. And then the rest of that behind it will be going gold. Kind of the same vibe here. The globe. This rim will be silver. Then the arrows will be gold. I'm debating on doing that gold. Debating. I don't know yet. We're going to do all of the straight line bars here. We're definitely going to do these silver. That's how we did them on the other models. So we're going to go ahead and follow suit with that. I'm just going to put paint over the skulls. So when it's time to come back and paint the skulls and the helmets and all that, not a big deal. Silver is a fine base for it. And this brush I'm using is a junk brush, Artist Loft 5. We just want something big. Something big with a lot of body, it'll hold a lot of paint, so we can get more brush strokes without having to refill the paint on the thing. That's the key focus. All looks very, very monotone now, but stay with me. Stay with me. All right, so that's gold behind there, but I think we're going to just do that whole thing gold, the front emblem and that kind of diffused emblem behind it. Rocket launchers are going to go gold, but we'll do the hardware holding them silver. I'm also going to go ahead and paint these lights silver. We're likely going to put a filter over top of them. We're not going to do much, if any, of an OSL effect on them. I think one of the things that's going to take the most time is just going to be picking out all the different helmets and skulls and stuff like that on here. But a lot of that stuff we're going to be able to do by just taking, our metallics that are on here. if they're good, we might be able to come across the different Space Marine helmets with different colors of contrast paint, and then maybe a highlight color just to give them a little bit more depth, and then done, right? Again, efficiency is key. And I mean, we're not trying to go Golden Demon, but we do still want them to look good, right? We still do want something that people will look at and be like, huh, very nice. And you'll notice I'm pulling all of this paint towards the middle. And that's because when you have a loose paint, a lot of times it can kind of splatter when you're trying to move it around, especially against a surface like these tank treads that have just a ton of raised detail. So they're going to splatter in the direction I'm pulling the brush. And so if I get splatters on the undercarriage, again, doesn't matter much. Butt chains. What's going on, Treachery? Great to see you. Speaking of butt chains, painted my last Rhino entirely with a makeup sponge, 100%. It's a really kind of a good way to kind of go about it. That makeup sponge is going to kind of force you to acknowledge those contours unless you're just jamming it into every recess. And also a really great way to just put some texture onto a piece. And I definitely like texture on vehicles. Big, flat panels that are a single color. You guessed it, boring. And it's pretty incredible, like, just how little effort it takes to add some interest to a project. Making sure we got all the important stuff on the treads. Same thing again, globe. Ring with teeth. And then the circle with the arrows will go gold. Now I'm going to do the corn emblem above this side in silver. I didn't do that on the other side, so I'm going to go back and do it on the other side for the other one. Now the downside for the golds I got to do is I don't like the gold for these metal colors for that part of the process. I used Retributor gold, Retributor armor for the commission. So I'm going to use either that or some replacement for that for our golds. That means it's not going to paint on as quickly and smoothly, but at least we're getting all this silver knocked out of the way pretty quickly. So we're going to do both of those copper or gold. Maybe we will. Maybe I'll change my mind. I don't know yet. Yep, definitely looking forward to getting that Emperor's Children project started. Definitely am. Don't know if I'm necessarily looking forward to getting it finished yet or not. That's always the drag. Starting a project is always new and fresh and exciting. Then you get to a certain part of the race where you're like, well, you know, there's still a long way to go. All right, most of that's going to go gold. We're going to put a gold trim on the body of this gun and keep the white there. So doing silver alongside of it, I think is a good call. And I hope you guys are taking note of just how sloppy this brushwork is. Right? Like, I mean, I'm painting with brush strokes and it's like my first day having thumbs. You know what I mean? And that's by design. Just got these brand new thumbs in, trying them out. No, that's not what I meant. Like I said, I firmly believe in the hobby. Most of the things that I'm able to accomplish, I think most of them are things that even people very early on their journey could also accomplish as well fairly easily. Sometimes your order of operations is more important than the application. All right, next up, we're going to do some gold. But let's stretch it out, huh? Stretch it out, get our arm's reach look at it, make sure all of those volumes are reading well for us. And I think you can see, had this been one rhino that we were doing on stream tonight, I would absolutely, without question, have one rhino completely finished on stream tonight. Being that we are doubling up the workload, there is the possibility that we don't get it all completely done, but you should be able to see enough of the project to know what all goes into the project. All right, let's get to work on these golds here. So I think this is our analog in two thin coats. This Dragon's Gold is going to be our closest deal to Retributor armor. So we're going to use that here this evening. I don't have a Retributor armor on my desk, and frankly, I don't want to go back into the shop to grab another paint. But I'm willing to bet with 90 different colors of two thin coats in front of me, I can find the colors I need. Now what we are going to do is we are going to add just a little bit of airbrush thinner to this gold. Just like, that was like 2 drops maybe. Because I'm not going to want this to go on thick. But I will still need the coverage. So let's get in here and make it happen. still using that 5 brush size. Use the biggest brush size you can. Certain tasks are going to call for that 00. But if that 00 is your workhorse, you can increase your brush size and knock off a good amount of time painting. Now, I painted these guys silver on top, but I'm going to have to come back and touch that silver again because we're going to get gold on it painting in those recesses. On the top facing parts of these, I'm going to make sure I hit the edges. I'm not going to worry about all the ones underneath though. I actually think that we're going to extend this gold inside of there, right on the interior there, to really make the silver pop, whereas right now it's just kind of got the white background. And although this ring is typically hollow, it's a ring with a hollow center that has all these arrows off of it. Sometimes we might make a decision just to boost contrast. I'm going to get it painted as is and, maybe sit on it for a moment. See what it needs. Because sometimes the thing that we think it needs is not the right move. And so you don't want to just jump every time you have another idea. Take a moment, do all the things that you know need to happen, and then, give yourself time to consider what the right move is. Again, this is a commission piece. If you might be looking to have something painted up by the studio, maybe even here on stream at some point in the future, make sure you jump in that Discord in the video comments below. You can message me directly on there. Hobbyhosen is what I go by on Discord. I'd be happy to discuss with you what it would look like to get something like this done for your collection. We are probably 60 to 90 days out from being able to take any new commission requests, so just do keep that in mind. But on the same vein, if it's something that you might want to do, definitely get with us before we book our next line of stuff, because that 6 to 9 months can quickly become 9 to 12 months. Or, I'm sorry, 60 to 90 days can quickly become 6 to 9 months, right? And just another reminder, you see we're using junk brushes because we're using metallics. Don't ruin your good brushes with this very abrasive pigment that makes these metallics shine. Get a cheap synthetic. A, it's a lot harder to beat them up than your real hair brushes. B, a lot easier to replace them once they're beat up. Let's check our edges. It's amazing how sometimes resin kits like this can be the best and worst thing that you have to paint on the model. Lots of really cool detail to it, but once you start to get in close and you start to see all the flaws and imperfections in the sculpt, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. Okay, that's looking good there. Let's go ahead and get the trim on this gun. See what I mean though? 5 round, big brush. Still can get this paint trim painted pretty easily on here. Right, detail on these is pretty shallow, so slow and steady for this stuff here. Still a little shocked. None of you guys have seen that dude I'm talking about on YouTube. Onyx the Fortuitous. I don't know. What's going on, Matt Aaron? Great to see you, my friend. I assume you were at Adepticon this year. How was it? Or maybe you weren't and you've just decided to let other people have a chance to win the hobby track. I don't know. Maybe that's what's going on. Yeah. Big congrats at Matt Aaron and Antiquities at best overall at Adepticon teams. Hell yeah. Yeah, that checks out. That checks out. Very few people, maybe none I can think of off the top of my head. So I just have to assume maybe there's someone who's got more hardware than Matt Aaron, from all of the events he's traveled. But I know that when I was on my big push, that was the one hill I could not climb. Very, very talented fella right there, guys. Adoption was freaking wild. I know what you meant, but somehow what actually got auto-corrected is even better. Adopticon, let's go. Yeah, I think it's a must go next year. Right, I was talking with my guys over at Transatlantis Games, and I could have, if I had the time available, I could have gone out there and set up with them and Duncan and done our normal hangout, and just couldn't make sense of it this year. But I think next year I have to prioritize it. Those two regrets I have, right, is not getting out to Monte San Sabino this year or Adepticon this year. So I think next year we're going to make sure both of those things happen. Spent a lot of time in the army painting world, right? Not really pushing Golden Demon level stuff, and Monte San Savino would have been an opportunity to get out there and not only be able to see all that kind of stuff, but also, expand my judging horizons by being able to be a judge out there at that event and, really learn a whole lot more about what type of stuff to be looking for at that really high level of paint. There's a lot of forgiveness in army painting. right? But when you start talking about Golden Demon, Slayer swords, like that level of paint, right? There's a whole lot more to be considered, right? It's not just, look, if I'm judging you at a champs event, I'm not going to give you an award just because you did a harder thing than somebody. If somebody did an easier thing, but it led to a more cohesive project and finish at the end of it, well, that person that did the easier thing, you know, might very well win it. And really a lot of the stuff that I was able to pull down, a lot of the trophies I was able to pull down in my time competing were using techniques that were considerably easier than, you know, really creamy blends and all of that sort of stuff. However, at the big show, when you're up against, you know, the who's who of the painting world, you have to do the hard thing. You know, you have to. You don't have a whole army full of models, you know, to kind of hide away the bad stuff and showcase the good stuff. Yeah, I had an opportunity last year to go out there and stay in the Tooth and Coats chalet. They had an extra room for me, and would have been hanging out with Goobertown, and of course a bunch of other people that made it out. And again, it was one of those that I just didn't have time to plan for it, and you know, be able to still do all the things that I needed to do back here, and I regretted it. So next year, top priority. And I mean, getting a chance to see different parts of the world. I mean, I've been all over the country for 40K, and that's cool. But being able to see different parts of the world for those types of events, can you imagine? All right. And I think we're going to do it. I'm going to loosen up the paint a little bit more for these rocket launchers here up top. But yeah, we're going to go gold. Let's go in your face with them. These are speed paints, right? So, like, you know, not the materials or products I'm using, but the nature of this job, right, is fast and efficient is what we have to go for here. So we don't have time to do a bunch of the hard stuff I was just talking about, which makes it that much more important that we do put good contrast colors and throughout the model, right? A lot of times the science of color can do the thing for us if we don't have time to like really do all the crispiest techniques. And so something like right here on top of the model, this nice pop of gold, especially once we add that red to it and really make it nice and warm, it should look really good against all the cool surrounding. I mean, a lot of how your model looks is about decisions that you're making and not necessarily about the paints that you're using or the techniques that you're applying. Color theory is rather important. Composition, rather important. I'll tell you the other thing, next year, Adepticon, I'm really, really pushing Cryface. I would really like to see him submit something for Golden Demon consideration. The actual straightforward, honest truth, I think that he's definitely good enough to get a commendation of sorts, maybe a pin. but I don't think that he'll be good enough to win a Golden Demon until he's gone and tried a couple of times, right? When you're in kind of an echo chamber or a vacuum, it's real easy to kind of skill cap yourself, right? You really have to put yourself up against people who are absolutely crushing it to find out the stuff that you're missing. And Cryface is such a talented painter that I think that's the next logical step, is to put him in a situation where he is in over his head compared to the top cut. I think that based off things that I've seen at those events that didn't get their pins or whatnot, rarely have I seen somebody that's gotten a pin on something that I don't think Cryface could do, right? So that's my goal. If you guys see Cryface, tune in for that Wake and Make on Mondays. Make sure you shout that out. Make sure you call him to task. Say, get an offering ready for Golden Demon, right? I really think it would do well for him. All right, we're going to let those settle in. When we come back, we are going to start dropping some of our filters on there to really warm up those golds and cool down those silvers. I met Eric one time, super talented guy. I think I met him on a bad day though, because frankly, he just didn't seem like he wanted to talk to anybody. And I didn't know who he was, right? He introduced himself, I'm Eric Swinson. And I was like, cool, what does that mean? You know what I mean? And, he took me through the whole, I do box art, I do this, I do that. And I was like, okay, that's neat. I'm an army painter, right? That stuff's not really my bag. And I don't know if that put him off, or like I said, maybe he was just having a bad day. But we didn't exchange any other words the entire weekend. And if you guys know me, I like to run my mouth. I like to just talk and socialize and visit, as old folks say. While that settles, let me refill the Hosen juice, man. Gotta get this Red Bull capped. Red Bull. Yeah, I would say the same thing for you as well, Matt, is that similar to Cryface, I think you're at that stage in your painting where you're naturally always going to do very good at champs, right? Or any equivalent, any kind of army judging. I think that you've got that locked down. I think you need to get into a pond with those bigger fish that require that you really do the best of your work. And that'll really help you grow immensely. I would be surprised if you entered something and didn't get a commendation of some sort as well, a finalist pin or something. I would be pretty shocked if you didn't knock that down. But I think that's a good logical step for you. I think you've got the skill set and the talent, and after seeing all of the wood grain on your Death Guard cultists and whatnot, I mean, I know that you've got the patience for it too. So, you know what? Do the hard thing, man. Do the hard thing. You can do it. Yeah, I think you can start to see now kind of those things cooling down. It shouldn't be something that's overpowering or overwhelming. I need to come back and retouch that silver, so I'm going to avoid that for right now. Let this get in all these other places first. And just again, this is temperature study, right? Your neutral colors, your whites, your different shades of gray, your uninformed black, all of those are going to behave according to what they're adjacent to. So if you can take and force the temperature that you want it to be, not only will it have a positive impact on that, but it'll also have a positive impact on those things that would be informing it otherwise, right? So you're kind of flipping it on its head and saying, all right, well, this cool metallic is now making certain parts of that white feel warmer. And if we just painted silvers and we just painted whites and we didn't cool anything down or warm anything up, once you see something like that in a black and white photo, you know, all of those values just kind of run together. And not just black and white, like kind of low quality photography too, the stuff I'm best at. You know, if you got a bunch of neutrals, it's going to be really hard for that camera to figure out what that focal point is. And it's just going to kind of look kind of mucky to the eye. Yeah, and Dean P., I'm not forgetting about you, man. I'm definitely cheering for you on your future capital palettes and golden demon pushes and everything like that. But I think, like we've talked about in the past, the biggest thing that stands in your way, in my opinion, would be you just need to slow down, right? You got to make sure you take the time with it. The time you put into 5 battle boards, for example, put into one really stunning one, right? You've got all the skill sets. But if you're up against a clock, that clock is going to limit your productivity, your output. Take on a project that has no clock on it. Take on a project whose goal is, I want to paint this thing as good as I can paint it, time be damned. And if it's something that you come back and revisit every so often in between your big projects that you need a push for an event or whatever, you come back when you have time and you sit back and you do a little bit, and then you come back and you do a little bit again, you know, you're raising the stakes on the final product, right? You're trying to do something as good as you possibly can. That raises the stakes. However, you're lowering the stakes on your time frame. Maybe it takes you a year. Maybe it takes you 5 years. That doesn't matter, right? All that matters is that the end result is you giving it your all. And I know that you're like me in a lot of ways, that you have a lot of really cool ideas, a lot of stuff that you want to do. And, well, there's no time to do it all unless you hurry. So you kind of defeat that urge and that instinct. And I'd love to see what of yours ended up in a case after that. Well, I'm a sucker, so I'd love to see anything that you do anyway, regardless. But that's my motivational speech for you. Got another guy in the club, Kevin Grubbs, another beautiful painter too. And that's another thing I'd like to see from him. You know, let me see your absolute best work where you had no regard for how long it would take to get there. Okay, so this up in here. Yeah, that's going to take touch up too. So I'll just come back to this piece. Hell yeah, brother, we'll remember. right? You set your own personal goals, which also means you determine your win conditions, all right? Nothing anybody else thinks about your work matters at all, not even a little bit. Not even if you've taken that work out somewhere to be paint judged for a potential score in something. Their opinion means very, very little. All right, so we're going to give this until 10 o'clock. We're going to do as much as we can over the course of the next 30 minutes, and then we're going to go ahead and jump into our feedback portion of the show. I've got Discord pulled up over there. Again, only a couple of entries for the Hobby Pants feedback right there on our Discord channel. If that's something that you would like to get your work, have a little feedback done on your work, all you got to do is drop it in that channel. You know, when I've got a couple of pieces to do, I will add the segment to the show. We'll get on. I'll talk about it. Many times, if I've got enough heads-up time, I can even run through Photoshop and give some examples of some of the changes or additions that I might make to a piece for my own sake, right? And to give you guys a point of reference. The couple of questions we've got tonight didn't really have the need for any kind of Photoshop examples like that. They're pretty straightforward questions, but we're going to get to those tonight. But yeah, let me know what you would like from me, and I would be happy to oblige. After a week, start to finish. You can do it. Little question mark on that one. I mean, I think you could, if I'm being completely honest. I think you could. All it would take is that week you'd have to do everything you possibly could on the piece, and then you'd have to find a way to sabotage literally everybody else competing. You know, just hire assassins at the airport or whatever. If they're carrying a miniature, just delay them, take them out, right? I promise you there is not a single piece of work, you know, in those cabinets that didn't take an immense amount of effort. Oh, Cody, I didn't see that. Damn it. I'll have a sword. Oh man, I love big clumsy steps though. One of the things I've learned with painting that Marvel Crisis Protocol is that it's actually more challenging to paint in 40K. 40K has got a lot of the details that you get in a lot of 40K models are just hyper detailed, right? The sculptor did most of the work for you. All you need to do is acknowledge all of the nooks, the crannies, the contours, right? The hard edges, leverage techniques to bring those out. So much of Marvel Crisis Protocol is very, very shallow detail that you have to embellish with layering and blending in order to get it to really pop off. It's been quite a challenge, an enjoyable one, don't get me wrong. but quite a challenge. Quite happy with the direction Magneto is going. You know, the other ones, you know, they could be better. But so could I. Okay, so I need to reinforce that silver there from the gold. I missed some parts on the tread, so we're going to have to revisit that. So I think that is good enough for government work with the blue for now. Does this tread need anything? Let me get the silvers touched up where they're needed, and then we'll move on to the next step. Okay, cool. Just clean this edge. Cool. All right, we can let that dry down. I was really kind of hoping to get to that streaking grime for Panzer Grey tonight, because that's the thing that really pushes these to that next level. Once we get that kind of dark rust red filter really starting to fall in and fill those gaps, really makes a huge difference on the model. So maybe I'll finish them up Thursday night on stream so I can share that with you guys. I'm working on some technical difficulties that I'm having with getting my pre-recorded done. You know, I can record in 4K, but there's something about the file transfer that's happening from the computer application to my hard drive that is not working correctly. So I've got to get that resolved. I've got 3 video attempts I've done now for pre-recorded that ended up with just audio tracks. And can you imagine a kind of a painting tutorial as an audiobook? This shit don't work. Does not work. Okay, let's go ahead and get into... Yes, oh good, I thought I was going to have to go get another paint off the wall out there. Let's go ahead and get our Gilliman flesh cooking for our golds. Again, nice shake. Again, we're going to loosen it way down. Break that medium. And then you can see Gilliman flesh has a good amount of red in it. So again, that's going to take our gold that is already very warm by nature and give it depth, right? Adding warmth to it, getting that warmth even more saturated in those recesses, making it that much more prominent and powerful. A little warm next to a little cool doesn't do much. A lot of warm next to a little cool, that's better. A lot of cool next to a little warm, that's better. A lot of cool next to a lot of warm, peak. And again, we've broken the medium, so the medium is not contracting the way that contrast paint wants it to. So that means it's going to stay where I put it. And what will likely happen is we'll likely come back once everything is nice and dry, and we'll highlight golds, we'll highlight silvers with those original colors to really, like, you know, take it to that next step as well. It's a nice, easy process to do. Doesn't take much effort at all, and yields a pretty good result. So especially something like this, you want to make sure that Gilliman flesh, wherever the gold meets the silver, you want to make sure that we've got a fair amount of Gilliman flesh in there so that gold is getting the warmest right where it connects to the coolest. And depending on what colors you're going for, like, you don't have to use Gilliman flesh. You don't have to use Griff Charger Gray, right, for your silvers. You just want to think about the values in terms of temperature. But I mean, just like, take a look at that, for example. This little icon. And it gets so much more depth with just that easy, easy step. Another thing too here is on these silvers, that Gilliman flesh, you see where I've got a little bit that's overlapping the silver on top. Maybe you see it, maybe you don't. Well, we're painting a true metallic metal, and true metallic metal is reflective. And so if you've got an edge of something that's aimed at something else, it's going to take on some of those colors through reflection. So I'm not worried one bit about Gilliman flesh, you know, hitting parts of that silver. If Matt is still here, was it the Necrons you had out at Adepticon? Now remember, these were shallow details right here. We took our time to paint the gold on there as to not get it on the white. This is something we're going to be careful of with this Gilliman too. We don't want that Gilliman on that white either. So again, slow and steady. And then I want to put a little bit right there in the middle. Let it pool right there, just to give it a little bit more shape. doing second and third passes in certain places, like right here underneath there. There's going to be a lot of shadow that skull is casting on it. The stronger the shadow, the more that skull iconography and everything is going to stand up off of it. So again, just plenty there. Yeah, we do have another goblin out there. You guys might know Impending Duff. If not, check him out. He does most of his stuff on Twitch. I think he's just started doing YouTube stuff here recently. But he was out there teaching classes. And he got a finalist pin for a PC submitted as well. I love to see my friends out there doing good. I mean, whether it's, painting competitions or whether it's just everyday life working out for them, both are great things to see happening. Okay, we have 20 minutes to 10, so what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and just finish up the blue, the little areas I had to touch up, the silvers. We're going to go ahead and get those blues in there. So tank treads, for example. And we're not going to worry so much about the ones underneath. Just hit these parts right here. Those are the parts that are important. This being a commission, I don't mind Cody being out there, getting a good paint score to help him for his best overall or whatever it might be. Right? But a commission army to be judged in paint, very hot topic in the competitive paint world, right? Should I be able to take home hardware for an army that I had commission painted? I think as long as the artist is accredited with the work, I don't see a problem with it. But most places, most events that have any kind of paint judging happening at them don't have the infrastructure for that to even matter. Do you know what I mean? That's what's so refreshing about events like Adepticon. When I first heard about Adepticon, the first thing I heard about it was about their attention to art. And most of your events, they might give out a best paint prize or whatever, but they don't really care about the artwork. Right, that's not what they're there for, So it is nice to have those events where art does take center stage. As I'm always going to be impressed by something somebody painted up than decisions somebody makes piloting a list or writing a list. Look, hats off to you guys that get out and win a bunch of events. That's good. That's good. You set your mind out to do something. You cultivated a skill set to be able to do it well and consistent. That's commendable. I don't want to take anything away from me on that. But commendable and impressive are two different things for me. You go hit podium on a bunch of events for paint, well, that's 100% on your own merit, right? That's things that you had to learn and separate yourself from other people. Because not too frequently do you see just copycat box art hitting a podium for an event. Typically, it's something that somebody has done different, something they've done unique or original that really does gets most of that attention. And so not only are you learning techniques for painting, but you're also having to learn to define your style. right? You can go net list a broken army and get some practice reps in it so you understand how to play it into other armies. And you haven't really done much in the original vein there, right? Took Aaron's blending class. Aaron, does Aaron have a last name? AC Miniatures? I'm not familiar with AC Miniatures. And my buddy eBay Miniature Rescues is out at Adepticon showing off his little stampers. Have you seen those yet? Did you get to see those out while you're out there? Or see the Goobertown collab they did where they put them to work? I haven't got to try them myself yet, but having watched them in action on the video, quite impressed. So I am doing the bottoms here, guys, just because I have enough paint in the palette. And if it's going to go to waste, may as well get it blocked in there. Same thing over here. And then we're going to let these sit for Thursday. Now, I know the guys are chomping at the bit here in the studio, the Cave Rep studio, for those Emperor's Children, so we might keep those on task for Thursday. I'll drop it in front of those guys, see if anybody there has any preferences here. So I might do something like finish these up off stream. If that is the case, I will show off the work that I did in your absence off stream, so I can at least talk up, or on stream rather, so I can at least talk about the processes that I executed to get them where they were. So we'll just play it by ear. You guys will know what Thursday looks like as soon as I pump out a thumbnail for it. Until then, I think that's a really good start for tonight. We are about 2 hours and 15 minutes of work into them, well over halfway there. So, if we can get 2 rhinos fully painted up in about 4.5 hours, I think that that's something to be pretty happy with. So let's go ahead and prepare ourselves for going through this feedback right here on Discord. Got to clean up our workspace first. I just take these trays right here and just dump them in my water cup because I'm a barbarian. Yep, they should go together pretty well by the time we're done. Dude, I am so ready for 2 thin coats to start producing a contrast equivalent paint. Right now, like the only Citadel I use right now are these contrast. And if I had a 2 thin coats replacement for all of them, yeah, I might never buy a Citadel paint again. Not that they're bad, guys. Citadel paint are good. They are good. Part of it is protesting the dropper ball, or the pots, of course. But the other part of it is kind of the price. One of the most expensive paints on the market, and clearly, without question, the worst bottles. The worst. So let me show you guys here as well. I talk about showing you guys some stuff I'm doing off stream. So we did last week get to play around with our first Marvel Crisis Protocol, and we've got Magneto, you know, almost there. Got all the basing stuff to do for him still. All right, come on, focus. There we go. So he was a lot of fun. Very happy with how he turned out. Really nice color interaction. Really nice textural stuff on the cloth. You know, gotten a little extra shine, which he needs a matte coat. I should have done that tonight, but we'll do that all at once. You know, very happy with how he's shaking out. But again, a lot of this, I had to be very specific with where I put my blends because it just wasn't evident. This guy's not as far along, but we got Sabretooth cooking right here. You see, I do have a bit of a shine, needs to be knocked off with a matte coat there. You'll be able to see some of the blends a little bit smoother. But, you know, going the 90s cartoon route, I want really kind of very vibrant, very saturated models. Mystique doing her little thing right here. Her white got a little away from me, so there's parts of the white that are a little bit more textured than I really would have wanted. But again, she's about 50% or so. And then Toad is like, you know, the not the farthest along, right? He's got the most work left to do on him. But we did him kind of side by side with that Sabretooth. I wanted to make sure that their color palettes kind of fit together while still being a little bit different. So we're going to do a lot of the similar purples that we did into Magneto, into the purples of Toad. You know, that way they all look like they belong in the same comic book. You know, they're using the same colored inks, you know, like they would in that same comic book. But there you have it. So let's go ahead and swap over here, and let's have ourselves a quick look at Discord. Aha! This is a brand new scene I set up for tonight, so I did not import the microphone over to it, but we are back in business now. Okay, so let's again have a look at what he is asking. All right, Josh W. says, I'm trying to refine my EC paint scheme. Second picture is my older scheme. First is just noodling and testing things. I'm not entirely sold on doing animal prints on my EC, but I'm having trouble trying to have some separation. One thought I've had is doing my little gradient across the model, then blacking out the shoulder pads and the bits that are brass right now. All right, so again, let's look at our photos here. Like we talked about, we've got, I'm looking past the model right now. I'm seeing your golden line of paints on here for your fluorescents. I'm seeing those two thin coats. I'm seeing Monument Hobbies. I see Vallejo metal color in the background. All right, I even see your Liquitex inks right here, like maybe a raw sienna or something. That might even be Ellendale Violet right there off the left. So great choices on the paints that you're using. I own all of those paints. They are in my regular rotation, so you're a step in the right direction. So there's the first one. Here is the second one. Now this is his older scheme. All right, no animal prints here really, but you are taking your gradient all the way to a blue to a purple. All right, so what you're asking for is separation, and you're kind of making commentary on the animal prints. So let's start with the animal prints, okay? The animal prints themselves are going to be a tricky thing. It's going to be really hard to knock down an animal print and have it readable unless it's done very well. There's a lot of tricks that we can leverage when miniature painting that, look like a thing that they're not. And we do that on purpose, right? With adding texture to cloth to make it look different from like a latex or a metal, right? Or, doing various different shading types or weathering techniques like with sponges, right? We can trick a person into thinking they see what we want them to see, even though they're seeing something completely different. With something like an animal print, that's not the case, right? Your zebra stripes have to be on-point zebra stripes, undeniable zebra stripes. Your cheetah pattern has to be undeniable that it's a cheetah pattern from the moment that you see it. So if you're going to go the animal skins route, practice, 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 right? Get your reference material, put a zebra up on your screen, zoom in on just like the ass cheek or something where you've got a nice chunk of like zebra flesh that you can replicate, and just work on replicating it. Otherwise, it's going to look like you tried to paint a thing and not like it is a thing, right? We're liars. That's what we're here to do. We're here to lie to our audience, and they want to believe it. They want to believe that that's a zebra stripe on his legging. They want to believe there's cheetah stripe or cheetah patterns on his legging. But if you give them reasons not to believe it, then they'll never believe it, right? So that's the thing I would tell you about your animal prints. If you want to incorporate them, just really dial them in. Right? To really dial them in, you're not going to be able to cheat your way through that one like we can with so many other things. Now, for separation, that was your original color. In this picture that we're looking at right now, you've got your purple is your coolest color, and it itself is still very warm. There's still a lot of the reds and those magentas in that purple that are going to keep it warm. So it's cool by reference, right, by juxtaposition to the extreme, like the hot pinks and whatnot, but you don't have any cool on there at all. Now, like we were working on with these rhinos here tonight, if you do something with silvers and you allow those silvers to take blue undertones, then you can cool those silvers down, and then you start to have extreme contrast from one point to another on the model. The same can be said with your blacks. Since you've got so much warmth on here, when you apply your blacks with a bit of a blue to them, with something that cools those blacks down. Out of the bottle, black is neutral. White is neutral, right? All they're going to do is carry what they're adjacent to. If you turn that black and make it undeniably cool, well, now that cool is juxtaposition, right? That's the thing that's really going to break it up. So I think you're on the right track with blacking some things in, but when you do so, consider a cool value being added to that black, so it's not just a neutral color being added. Right, and that's you've kind of got something like that cooking here on this one with your, with your cool blue right there on those feet, right? But that's not giving you separation on your model, right? That's giving a little bit of separation to the base. And I dig it. It looks pretty cool, don't get me wrong, but you definitely need things throughout the model that are going to shift that. So you got gold trim silver trim with some cool values to it, right? That would help. Like we just talked about, those blacks getting worked in there will help. You can even take some of your whites, like we've done with that Apothecary, or even if you want something stronger, like with that Grift Charger Gray, right? And take all of your neutrals and assign them a temperature value. Whatever is going to best complement your composition, that's what's going to do you the most work. So super excited to see where you go with these. I really think you're off to a really good start. And hopefully, hopefully that is helpful for you. But as always, this segment should be called Free Advice is Worth What You Pay For It. So thank you for sharing and giving us an opportunity to discuss them here on stream. So we did kind of deviate and get into conversations about playlists. Right, so that was that next series of conversation. Make sure you jump on in this Discord and engage with the channel if you're so inclined. We have a lot of great conversations in here. So the next one that we have for consideration this evening, there's going to be a fair amount to unpack here. We do have a few minutes left, so I'm going to just dig right on in here. Now this is Shane, or Citrus Sloth. Great to see you. Thanks for the comment, Citrus Sloth. Appreciate the opportunity to discuss your work here as well. I know the picks are mid, but I'm looking for some feedback on how to speed up my painting process for these Tyranids. I currently feel like I'm spending a lot more time base coating than normal, and I'd rather spend more time on the details so I can actually develop skills for brush control. What techniques would you use to speed up a paint scheme like this? How would you improve the scheme? And it breaks down the current painting process. Prime black, dry brush, Eshin gray, 3 to 6 coats of red, 1 to 3 coats of orange, 1 to 3 coats of yellow, all of which pushing to full opacity. The talons, 2 coats of deep blue, full opacity, 1 coat lighter blue for a highlight base, wet blend those 2 colors to transition brighter to tips of talons, 1 edge highlight with skink blue, and then 1 to 3 thinned coats of Drakenhof Nightshade to bring everything together. All right. Brains, Saman's talons with less wash, more highlights. So let's go ahead and dig in on some of these pictures here. So here's the first thing off of the rip. If you are going to be painting opaque, don't waste your time with a zenithal. I know that not doing a zenithal itself isn't going to cut a whole lot of time off of your project, right? But the dry brush can be a fair amount of time that you're spending. Now, the reason I say this, it's nice to be able to have, if you're doing layer paints and you're going full opacity, it is nice to have a value sketch, right? Where you can see where your whitest of whites are and you can see where your darkest of darks are and use that to inform as you're painting, right? But that really only helps you if you are going to be applying multiple layers of paint to get all of the dimension and volumetrics baked into it. The fact that you are going to full opacity on these colors, I think you save yourself a very large amount of time simply by priming in something that's ready to receive your color. Right, so cut out your black spray paint or your black primer, cut out the Eshin gray dry brush, go straight to a white paint. You're dealing with yellows, oranges, reds, all of which can be kind of a pain to build up. And when those colors not only have to get to full opacity, but they have to get to full opacity to defeat the black beneath them, that's where you're getting all of your coats of paint that are having to go on over and over and over again. Also, you want to think about microns, right? Every layer of paint is going to slowly diffuse the details on the model. It's going to round out sharp edges, and it's going to, kind of obscure some of these smaller, finer details. So the less layers of paint that you can put onto a thing, the more you get to show off the sculpture that is beneath that paint. So that's where I would start if you're going this paint scheme. I would almost always recommend, if you're not going to be painting with transparency, don't worry about your zenithal. Right? If you're going to be overwriting all of that information, save yourself those microns of paint depth and get right into something that's going to carry those paints for you. Right? So I think that will help out a whole lot. You can still do your black, you can still do your Eshin gray on the base like I see here. That still is, really good for getting that type of texture in there. All right, let's take a look at some of these other pictures as well. So that's the other thing that I'm seeing here as well, is when I look at this piece here, your edge highlight of yellow is so far away from the orange. The orange is very desaturated. the yellow is very, very vibrant, right? And when we look at the application of the red and the orange next to it, I can see every brushstroke that you've made to put it on there. So when we talk back to, like we were saying with Josh, we're lying to our audience. We're saying, hey, look at this very real bug that's just very small and standing motionless, right? If we have got paint that is obviously paint, brushstrokes revealing that it's obviously paint, it makes it harder and harder to believe that lie. So what I would tell you is, with that orange, bring that orange up. Let that orange take up as much space as the red. But I would have those two overlap and allow for the red and the orange to have a middle ground where you've got a combination of those two paints, right? When you get to your edge highlight, then you can take that orange that you've got on the model and do your edge highlights in that orange. Once you've got them in that orange, then come back and take that yellow that you want to really hit the highest and brightest points with, and hit simply those highest and brightest points. So for example, where this point comes together right here, drop a little yellow right on there. Drop a little yellow right on here, right? All of these intersections here, right? Don't worry about running that yellow all the way up, right? Because then it becomes kind of like an inverted cell shading, right? It becomes like everything is a very clear, straight, and even line. And that's not the way light's gonna fall on a model anyway, right? So thicker edge highlight of the orange, and then a very gentle edge highlight of the yellow just on those sharpest and highest points. I think that'll help out a whole lot too, because I also know that even though that orange and that red is not a whole lot, darker than the yellow per se, right? Building up layers of the yellow to get a good, clean and consistent yellow across all of everything that you've painted is gonna be layers of paint to get it there. So that's the way that I would address the carapace. Right? Now you could do something if you wanted to stick with your zenithals and your slap chop methodology. I would recommend, the black into your Eshin gray, go very heavy with your Eshin gray, then take a dry brush and hit white on those top points. And then shift your palette from opaque layer paints into things like a contrast. Right? Into something that when you lay it down is still going to show through that value sketch you've placed underneath. So your darker spots do remain darker and your lighter spots do remain lighter, and that will also not only help with the speed that it takes to get it to where you want it to be, but it's also going to help with, kind of a bit of a realism. You're going to get color movement, you're going to get those values ringing through, and the application is going to go quite a bit easier. If you're able to utilize an airbrush to it as well, then you're taking a contrast paint, you're converting it to a filter, and then you can take and just start overlapping your reds and your oranges and getting a very natural gradient from that perspective. I would also try and look at things from a perspective of illusions, and not like illusions, what are you hiding? Not like, ta-da or abracadabra, but something that you are alluding to, right? If I look at a thing and it makes me think of a thing, it might distract me away from what it is that you want me to see. And so I'll take like the little horns on the end of his little tentacles there. Well, it might be just me, but it almost looks like candy corn. And I don't know about you guys, but I'm a fan of candy corn, so he kind of looks a little delicious, right? So just taking a look at what a shape is and what colors you're putting onto that shape, and are there other things that people are going to naturally see when they look at it, right? Think about branding for big companies, right? If you see a set of yellow golden arches, you're going to think McDonald's, even if it's not a McDonald's logo. Or you might think, that reds and yellows, you might think Kansas City because of like football affiliations or whatever. So you always want to consider, what are the colors that I'm using? What are the things that people are going to commonly see from those colors? In what capacity are people going to see those colors? And then find ways that you can utilize it without unintentionally alluding to something that you don't mean to allude to. I know that's a bit of obscure advice. Hopefully that helps. If it doesn't, not a big deal. It's not super crucial advice. But of course, feel free to ask for any kind of clarification on Discord that you have. The other thing that I will tell you right here, just kind of like the same thing that we were talking about before, right? With you know, with temperature. I like the blue on this guy a lot. All right, this guy, he's got the blue that's balancing out that cool. That's very nice, right? Now you've got like your warm and your cool interacting. Work some more of those blues into those blacks, right? Cool down those blacks, and so they stand up stronger off of that bright yellow and orange. And what you could do, what you've got kind of, it's almost Tron-esque with the way those colors are reading, with how strong that yellow is on there. What you can do right there is do some edge highlighting in blues that get steadily more and more vibrant on the black. It's going to lead you more down an illustrative path, more of a cartoony path with the final project, but compositionally speaking, they're all going to work together much, much better. All right. Another thing you might be able to do as well, take something like a contrast paint and use it as a filter for some of your recesses. All right, so these areas where the carapace right here overlaps, take a brush, get some contrast paint on it that's thinned down a bit, dab most of it off onto a paper towel, right? And then gently line with what's remaining on the brush, gently line the crease in that carapace, right? And that will help add shadows and depth and dimensionality. That'll help them really stand out much better at a greater distance. All right, let me see, we got one more picture here. I think, yeah, we're back to the first one. So here's a great example of that blue and that orange cruising along. And here's another example of right here, like on these legs, if you've got a hard shadow, you know, that stays in that warm family, right? A hard shadow right under each of those carapace pieces, I'll be able to see this leg a lot better compared to the background. Right now, if I squint just a little bit, this could easily be a part of this same piece right here. There's nothing that's telling me that they're different pieces. So being able to like really highlight each individual piece of carapace simply by deepening the shadows that separate them will go a long way. So either way, great job, both of you guys. Very excited to see which way these guys go. Also keep in mind, I'm looking at photos. Most of us that paint miniatures are not professional photographers, so there is plenty that is lost once we start looking at photos versus a piece in real person. If any of you guys are local and want to come sit down with me for a few minutes at any point, feel free to reach out. I can meet you up here at Counterspell. I can see them in person. We can discuss it. Maybe even take an opportunity to like try some of these theories out. But regardless, great work on what you have done so far, 100%. And again, thank you very much for allowing us to share that with the class right here on Hobby Pants. So there you have it, folks. That is another one in the books for us. Got just under 3 hours into these rhinos here this evening. It will take less than that to finish them outright. Right now, they're still kind of boring, being that they're just flat white, but that next step is going to do most of the work for us, and I'm looking forward to sharing that with you guys. As always, if you like the video, make sure you do hit the like button below. If you're not yet subscribed, hey, consider subscribing. We'd love to see you here more often. Either way, thank you so much for spending your time with us here this evening, watching this paint stream. Hopefully, there might be a couple of nuggets that might help increase the production or the enjoyment of your painting in the future. Big shout out, of course, to the Gob Squad. That's our membership community over on the primary Hobby Goblins channel. I see most of you guys in chat with me all night tonight. Most of you guys would have a membership badge if we were over on Hobby Goblins. And I just wanted to make sure I shouted out that huge thank you for all you guys do to help us grow that channel over there as well. Without anything else, guys, again, thanks again. Great to see everybody. We're going to go ahead and take this back out to the nethers. Until next time, keep your pants on.